Hey everybody, my name is Brandon Bray, and I want to say we are living through a really interesting period in time, and it's really cool. It's really interesting. Some might say it's frightening. I don't think it's frightening, um, but I think there is a perspective to look at it that is positive and promoting and potentially beneficial for all of us. And I probably want to sound crazy, and I probably may sound crazy, and that's okay. Just let me speak, right? But I want to eventually. What I'm doing is essentially just sharing my thought experiments, and essentially what that is, it's generally I like to peruse. I like to explore different concepts. I like to think of things in different ways. But I like to try to think of it in a way that makes sense, a way that's logical, in a way that applies to the real world and to different things that we experience. So that's the goal here. Um, and so the goal is to try to look at it in the most objective sense. So, you know, and also looking at it in respect to uh, different lens as well. So, for example, you have the religious lens, you have the political lens, right? Um, you have the ideological lens, and you want to make sure you understand that these lenses are legitimate points of view or legitimate perspectives. And they may all be pointing to one central thing, right? Their aim might be a little bit off, but they're still trying to achieve the same goal. And so we just want to make sure that we acknowledge that because I think of it in sort of such a way like imagine you have a smaller ball and a larger ball. And the smaller ball is kind of like the event that happens. And the ball that encapsulates it is represents the different perspectives that maybe witnesses or bystanders may have seen, right? So everyone has the same perspective on this, has everyone's witnesses the same event, but everyone has a slightly different testimony. And that's because of their position, their point of view, their frame of reference, all these sorts of things. That's why, depending on how you look at where certain events might happen, you'll get a difference of opinion. One might say, well, this is this, and the other person might say, well, this is that. And most people will side with the sides that they agree with the most, and that's how you get different sides. But I think what could potentially be the problem, is that there isn't an agreement and an acknowledgement of the perspectives that are there. And so because of that, um, you now have these different opinions that you know could potentially be polarizing, um, and could lead to some really bad looks. So, but I think if we encourage critical thinking, and I kind of want to delve into that at some point, if we can encourage just really exploring, you know, really just sitting down and just salivating and just kind of like meditating and concentrating on what are the different nuances and different situations that we encounter or different things that we hear or the messaging that we receive, and how does it benefit me, right? In one sense, it's taking kind of like taking it's basically taking a self audit, right? You're taking responsibility for yourself by really sitting down, looking at your life, looking at your structure, and just kind of thinking about how to set yourself up for your own personal success. um I know I just went on a long trail here, but that's part of the thinking process, right? You have to allow yourself to go on these little bit of, you can call it fantastic adventures, you can call it illogical trains of thought, you could call it that. I just like to think of it as a nice thought experiment, and I think we need to encourage more of this because maybe there could be something that's said that could inspire another thought. and another person could be inspired and say, that's actually not a bad idea. Let's consider that. And let's explore that route. And we have AI technology that could potentially do this. But I think it's important that we also, as humans, develop the skill because we're going to need it as well in our daily day lives. And we operate to this degree on a normal level. We just don't really think about it, right? Um, and I think if we just encourage, like, instead of a focus, a determined focus on trying to erase a problem that may or may not be a problem, what if we propose solutions to actually address the problems that we're pointing out in the first place, right? It's like, let's not just point out the flaw in the system, let's actually propose a solution to the flaw in the system. That would be the best way to get everyone on the same page because it's like, okay, if someone presents a plan, everyone can say, well, okay, that plan might suck, or okay, maybe that is a good plan. And then you can have all the varying opinions and degrees. Well, okay, maybe the plan is good here, except it's not quite so good in this area, or vice versa. It's good here, but it's terrible here. I think you should keep the good part, get rid of the bad part, right? Or maybe there are multiple good solutions, and the solution that works best is the one that wins out and ultimately gets implemented. So I like to go on these sort of quote unquote tangents, but it's not really too much of a tangent when you think about it, right? It's just thinking. Um, because you want to propose the opportunity for success. You want the success to be there, and you want to encourage people to find that success, and whether it's through long-winded content of just someone like me just sitting here just talking about thoughts and just exploring, opinions. You could kind of think of it as like a modern example of maybe like the writings, the journals of philosophers back then. Now, I'm not comparing myself to a philosopher, obviously. I'm just a simple man who likes to think a lot. But you could imagine they probably had back then in those days, they probably had people who just sat around, just talked, and just explored, have general discussions, and I could be missing out on a whole completely uh different um like I don't know if this is a thing or not, where people just sit and just talk about what they think and so forth, and then there's active discussions around that. I don't know if that's the thing. If it is, that's pretty cool, and I hope I can contribute to that discussion. Um, but instead of doing it in a sense where I'm just like, doing it in a video format with a lot of editing, I just kind of want to just sit here and just talk, and then let you guys be to decide. Now, obviously, depending on how long this video is, it could be long-winded, but I encourage people to just pause, to think, to comment, to reflect, and you know, am what I'm saying makes sense? Is there perspectives that I'm not acknowledging? I mean, right now I'm just kind of giving a general overview of my thoughts and my thinking process, and then depending on how either my brain works, or what topic I latch onto on the spur of the moment, I'll try to stay onto that topic as best as I can. Again, it's going to take multiple tries because you know you're going to witness a bit of a development, right? A psychological development, a reasoning art development, because you want to always be able to be looking forward. We want to think in terms of progress. How do we move forward despite the situations that might occur, mistakes might happen, bad things might happen? How do we simultaneously promote good, healthy thought processes? How do we encourage proper thinking, uh, encouragement, and do it in a way that's not intrusive, right? but it's very it works out to the good for everyone. Everyone benefits. Um, um, Everyone benefits from it, and yeah, we can actually see progress in our communication, progress in our discussions. Because I'll give a little bit of history about myself. Um, I was homeschooled from second grade to 11th grade, and this was uh, back in 2007. I want to say about 2007. I started homeschool second grade. I graduated out of high school 11th grade. Went to college. Um, got a degree in mechanical engineering, and I've been working as a mechanical designer. So, but since I was homeschooled, um, I grew up during the time where homeschool was evolving. So when homeschool was evolving, we had online classes. So a lot of these Zoom classes, Zoom meetings that we have today, I grew up on that. I grew up back when they had, and people who've been in homeschool who's used this program might remember. It was called Illuminate, Blackboard Illuminate, and it was basically like Zoom, except it was more presentation focused. So you had a big presentation, kind of like a whiteboard. It is essentially called a whiteboard, and then you have a smaller box here that had your participants. Sometimes you have a webcam feature that will show up there if people chose to use the webcams, and then you have your text box, and you use that to communicate with your peers and the teacher. You also had your microphone control. Um, and I grew up during that time where it was evolving, where early on it was all textbooks, and then when I came in, they were just ending the textbooks and starting to transition to online classes, online course material. Thank you. And yeah, give me a moment. My brain likes to run away from me. Um, where was I? Um, ah, yes, there was course materials. So, and then as time went on, and I got to about like fifth grade, around fifth grade, they were almost done making it all online course material, all fully online. So then about sixth grade is when they finally made the transition to online, fully online. And so what they would send us, instead of sending us the curriculum, because they would send us the curriculum in two types of books. Um you would have the parent teacher's guide, and then you have the student guide. So the student guide was like the student workbook, and then the parents slash teacher guide was um, the parents slash teacher's workbook, which would essentially detail how you should structure the program. And so we would so yeah, so then by sixth grade, at least for me, I think it was about sixth grade. Um, it started becoming more online. So then they would send us the actual textbook material. So like they would send us like the English books that we'd read during the course. And the student guide and the parent teacher guide was all online. So eventually what ended up happening was I actually slowly began to learn how to work independently. So initially there was a lot of interaction between my parents and I. And then later on, growing up, I actually ended up being both the student and the teacher because I was getting advanced to the point where my parents couldn't keep up. Like I was actually learning that well, and I was learning better than they could teach me. So, which is interesting to think about, but you don't really consider that part, right? So it is a very interesting phenomenon. But at any rate, um, so uh, once they fully became online, that's when I we started having homeroom teachers. Now I had homeroom teachers all the way up to this point. Um, I think it wasn't until actually high school, like ninth grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, where we didn't, instead of having homeroom, we would have like it basically was a homeroom, but it was like a high school homeroom where like every single high schooler was there, like ninth to 12th grade. I don't remember if it was called homeroom or it was called something else, but it was basically one of those things. And so, um, with that, um, I was notorious for being a clown. I was a clown. Okay, I would spam the chats, but I would do it intention. I would do it with purpose, right? So I was the good bad guy, if you want to call it that way. But basically, I was like spam the chat. But I wasn't doing it in a cast in a cat in a. I was one of the group of the original trolls, but I was the good troll, right? So like I would do troll behavior, but I would only do it in amounts that was actually funny and not like to the point where it drove people upset. Because at the end of the day, I just want to have lighthearted fun. I just want to be respectful and all these sort. Like I wanna put on a good atmosphere. I want to be happy. Like I want to do that, but I don't want to be disrespectful either at the same time. So it's kind of like pushing the rules or like reaching the extent of the rules but still having respect for the rules to not go beyond that. um yeah, that was an interesting time. Homeschool was a very interesting time. But I bring up homeschool because I think homeschool was one of the most important factors for the reason why I think and how I think today. Because I mentioned earlier how I eventually ended up being both the parent teacher and the student. Now that was now that was primarily because I would actually end up reading of the uh both of the books at the same time. So I would do the student guide first, do my homework and stuff, and after that's done, what I would do is I would go into the parent teacher book later and read that. So I now at the time I didn't understand what I was reading, but it kind of serves as the foundation for the basis of how I kind of function today as a person. Um, as far as like wanting to teach and having the passion to teach people and just like share my thoughts and kind of explain how I got to how I got there. Um, and that was so I was a very interesting kid. I would read anything and everything. So I would read cookbooks. I would read home improvement magazines. I would read bodybuilding magazines. Like I was information aholic. I just love to read. Anything I thought was mildly interesting, I would read it. And I think it's what helped me develop understanding of the world and the different things and the different opportunities that you have available to you. And with homeschool, it kind of inspired that sense of where I eventually had to learn how to teach myself. And learning how to teach myself involved learning more about myself, learning about how I function. And really, the only way to understand how you function is to actually sit and work with work with what you have. So if you want to think about it in an intellectual sense, um, let's say for example, so I'm drinking this tea, right? Okay, I drink the tea. Tea is pretty good. I actually don't even know why I'm even mentioning the tea. I don't even think tea aligns with the point I was trying to make. I just thought I was saying something interesting. Uh, Jesus. Uh, no, no, no. But think of it this way: you have to be acquainted with your systems, right? You get it. You get you. Okay. All right. Here we go. So you have a vehicle, right? You get a car for the first time, right? You don't just get in a car, start the car, put the buckle on, drive out, and just go. You don't just do that, right? There's actually steps to it, right? Now, you don't think of it as steps because it's just natural human behavior, but there are steps to it, right? You acknowledge, first of all, you have to acknowledge that that you now have a vehicle to drive before you can either drive, right? Now, you don't consciously think of this, but but if you were to observe a situation, you would agree that that's one of the steps in it, right? So you acknowledge you have a vehicle, you go to the vehicle, you open the door, you get in the vehicle, right? If it's a brand new car for the first time, you generally have to adjust the seats, you have to adjust the mirrors, you have to put your seatbelt on, right? You have to get the car comfortable to how it works. You have to be familiar with the operation of the vehicle. Well, thinking is kind of like the same way, right? You don't If you don't really know how your mind works, and you don't know the little quirks and ways that your mind goes, or how you observe information, well, it's very difficult to try to use it, right? So it's like, if you don't have practice with it, if you don't have practice with it, it's going to be pretty difficult to use. And it's a skill. I mean, ultimately, at the end of the day, thinking is a skill, and you have to practice using that skill. Excuse me. So these thought experiments that I'm doing, essentially recording per se, you could think of it as a lecture, as a speech, as a story time, whatever you choose. It's all up to you. It's all up to interpretation. Um, but at the end of the day, I think what's important is to realize that thinking is a something that we can do that's common, right? And everybody can do it. And to fall back, or to go back to what I was trying to emphasize with homeschool, was one of the skills that I learned how to develop from homeschool was learning how to think, because I had to think in terms of student to a teacher, a student to a problem with assistance from a teacher, and then how to think of it as a teacher to a student, teacher to a problem, how to assist the student. So I had to learn how to think both ways. And that kind of naturally came into that kind of naturally I started to naturally notice this more recently with how different events evolved in my life. Um, while I was in high school, I started doing tutoring for I think about 2 years. I did I did math tutoring, and then when I went to college, I did tutoring for 3 years. I believe I did 2 years, 2 or 3 years of programming tutoring, and 1 year of economics, and I think that was it. I think that was it. I want to say I think that was it. 3 years of programming and 1 year of well, I shouldn't say year. I should say semester, because technically it's semesters. Um, yeah. So 3 semesters. Yeah, 3 semesters of programming and 1 semester of economics. Um, I feel like I did 2 semesters of economics, but I think it's just one. I think it's just one. Yeah. Um, right. So there was this element of teaching that I noticed was prevalent throughout a lot of my life. And then whenever I would, so I also played piano for church, and I eventually ended up teaching a couple of my good friends of mine how to play the piano a little bit. I kind of gave them, I essentially just gave them like tips and ideas and try to look at it from a different perspective. And as far as I can tell, the last time I've seen them, which was fairly recently, actually, after about I want to say a 7 year gap, they seem to be doing pretty well, and I'm happy for them. Really, it's encouraging. Um, but like I've always noticed that I've had this knack, I guess, this inspiration to teach. And so that's kind of part of the reason why I decided to record this video now, because this is kind of like how exactly how I feel. And I just, instead of trying to structure it in terms of a central theme or context to the video, I just kind of want to just let you guys determine what the context of the video should be. The I just want to think, and I just want to share my thoughts, but I want to share in a way that makes sense, because, you know, it's hard to, it's really hard to sit down and think if you don't know how to think. Right? It's hard to talk about or think about certain subjects if you don't know how to approach it. And the only way you can approach certain topics is you have to have a frame of reference. Now, once you have that frame of reference, you have to understand that that frame of reference is just a frame of reference. And from that frame of reference, you can come to many different conclusions. And with that, the goal would be to figure out which conclusion brings about the best outcome, right? Uh, which conclusion can you observe, or yeah, can you, is there an observation to which you can make a conclusion that would provide the best uh, result that would benefit the good of, whoever's present in the situation or in said observation? Um, it's a little bit complicated. I feel like I'm speaking in circles. Uh, I don't think I am. I think once I explore these topics, and again, this is just a general thought experiment. We just sit down and just share your thoughts. Um, and I want to encourage everyone to just do this. You can take this video for as an example, starting point, and listen to something or a question I might propose, or an idea or concept I might share, and say, this might be a good idea. Why don't we try this? Or what would be the benefits of this idea? Or what would be the disadvantages of this idea? And then we can explore it a little bit longer. Because I think there are a lot of I think there is a lot of confusion about a lot of different things today, and there isn't a proper source of information. And I think it's not necessarily that there isn't a proper source of information. In fact, there's probably more sources of information than we can even believe. But there's so much information that's out there, we don't know how to even begin approaching the information. It's like throwing books at it's like throwing research papers at a 4-year-old who's learning to read for the first time, you know. It's on that kind of perspective. Where it's like, I don't even understand the first thing about this particular topic, and you're expecting me to do this. Um, but I think we have to acknowledge that not everyone is on the same page, and we have to get everyone to the same page. So we have to begin with the fundamentals. We have to begin with the basics and the basics of human thought. Uh, I'm not a psychologist, right? If anything, I would argue that I represent the common man, common everyday working man. I don't necessarily, I, I'm not engaged in a lot of physical labor, but I think it doesn't matter what type of labor you're in, whether it's physical or, it's my buddy, I'm gonna have to call him later. Um, um, I don't think it matters the type of work that you do, because thinking is something that's fundamental to every human behavior. And we need to inspire thought that inspires. We have to aspire to thinking that inspires. That's essentially what I want to do. And so that's why another reason why I'm doing these things. All right, my buddy's calling. Let me pause this recording, and well, I'll end the recording here, and I'll talk to you guys in another video.